insights and experiences MArc-1 students have had, both in applying to the program and in their careers after completing the program. And last, there's an email address to our graduate administrator if you have specific questions about graduate studies here at Carleton. Go to the next slide, Piper. Thanks. So Studio First is a program that builds a bridge from having a background in a different discipline toward architecture. And as I mentioned, specifically here at Carleton, that would be a bridge to the MArc-1 program, our 3-year master's program. Go to the next one, Piper. So students who participate in Studio First come away with 2 key things. One is a clear sense if graduate architectural studies is the right fit. Over the course of 5 weeks, you'll have experiences that replicate those of a graduate architectural studio. And the second is a competitive portfolio material suitable for use in graduate applications. This is a key piece. The portfolio is a very important part of applying to graduate school, and developing competitive materials is important to have a competitive application. Our program here at Carleton is quite competitive, and it becomes more so each year. So the types of projects that you will undertake in Studio First are specifically designed to help you accumulate the skills that you need and demonstrate them clearly to admissions committees. We can go to the next one, Piper. So the next few slides are just a sense of the type of work that goes on in our MArc-1 studios. So this was the very first project students did who had no background in architecture, no previous background in architecture, where they imagined devices at the scale of the body and interventions at the scale of the city that addressed the changes COVID has brought to the public realm. We can go to the next one, Piper. Another example of the same. We can keep going. Thanks. Also in that studio, students learn fundamental skills in how we conceive of a building in terms of structural systems, ideas about enclosure, how we respond to site constraints. So very, very quickly over the course of a few months, students apprehend the skills necessary to succeed in architectural education moving forward. We can keep going. Another example. And I think there's one more after, or a couple more. And then in the current semester, these students have embarked on an analysis of Barcelona, where their project is cited. In years that are not fraught with COVID, we travel to Barcelona for 10 days for a really intensive directed study filled with tours and a jam-packed itinerary. This year, we studied Barcelona from Ottawa. And so over the course of 3 weeks, students developed beautiful and intensive mapping exercises that documented the city and daily life within. We can keep going, Piper. Another example here. I think this is the last slide in my presentation, so I'll hand it off to Piper and Adriana now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Studio First Open House. Okay. My name is Adriana Ross. So the structure of the first portion of Studio First is divided in 2 main themes: traces of time, presence and absence. So the schedule will be every day. We'll start the online classes with presentation followed by introduction of the exercises and finish with comments and feedback. The students will become familiar with different representational techniques through iterative process. By transforming materials into ideas and changing from one medium to another, you will bring out and exercise our imagination. Next one, please. So the first thing you'll do after you receive your mystery box, you make a catalog of the items from the mystery box. Next one, please. So after a thoughtful process of investigating and recording the materials, a tectonic structure was made, defined by an interplay between open and closed spaces, moments connecting with the detail of motion, and a protagonist, a small animal figure included in the mystery box. Using the process of translation, iteration, the model was drawn as an abstraction by looking at it from different perceptual views using a play of line weights and shadows. Next one. A dialogue between the model and the drawing continued to evolve as the students progressed into the learning and understanding of a multi-layered process of moving from one translation to another as the work continued to form and transform. The slippages from one medium to another allow the students to go beyond the conventions. Lines. Lines carry information about geometry and materiality. The students will investigate the lines from the model and learn to represent them in paper. Next one. Using different types of lines and layered iterations, the students are introduced to plan, elevations, and sections. Learning how to represent volume through different rendering techniques and understanding the importance between negative and positive space. Mm. 3D visualization, we start with axonometric projection, which means learning how to represent three-dimensional object or space on two-dimensional surface, which is your piece of paper, three-dimensionally. The students are asked to draw a 3D view of their model and further elaborate on a drawing by using exploded axonometric, showing the complexity of the structure by pulling apart each component. Based on a Lisitsky process of constructing his pronouns and MCA show multiple viewpoints and impossible stairs, the students were asked to rotate the paper 90 degrees and add a new volume space corresponding to new orientation, training their eyes to recognize and visualize spaces from different angles. Next one, please. Another 3D visualization, in this case it's perspective, different techniques of representing three-dimensional space object two-dimensionally, three-dimensionally. Next one. Oh, is there before one more? Oh, no, okay. Rotation and hybrid drawings. From the conventional construction of the perspective drawing of the model, the students were asked to superimpose the perspective with a rotational axle, thus visually communicating and tracing in time complex spatial arrangements. This approach questioned the hegemonic role of vision in the making and reading of architectural drawings, thus offering a more discursive approach where the students trained to recognize, imagine, visualize new spatial configuration, and build authentic experiential library. Next one, please. And at the end of the week and a half, the students produce a panel including all their work. I think that's it, yeah. Guests were invited to see the work and the students will celebrate their achievement. I look forward to meeting you and I'm excited to be part of your learning journey. Next one, I think, yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Adriana. I'm sorry if I missed a slide in there for you somewhere.
Yeah,
so.
one slide, the alternative photograms, that was so important.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
We compiled a group presentation all together, and in my speed of compiling it, may have missed it, so I apologize for that. So it's very nice to see everybody. Hello, my name is Piper. Maria did a quick introduction. I'm relatively new to Carleton. I started teaching at the school a couple years ago, but in this last year have kind of moved into a kind of a fuller position, and I'm really pleased to be a part of the school. Carleton's a really great environment. It's a really great learning environment. I've had such a great time working at the school and working with students, and Studio First is an extension of that, is a part of that experience. And although it's been online, I just want to say that it's still been so much fun and such a great experience. And I think that we're in a strange world right now, but this is one of the ways that you can make the best of it, I think, actually, is kind of engaging in these types of courses online. So it really, please, oh, I'm not on the thing anymore. There we go. So I just want to talk to you a bit about the project that I ran this last summer that was really a lot of fun. And this isn't a student drawing, but this is a drawing by Matteo Pericoli. And in normal circumstances, if we were all together in a room, kind of like what Zach said, how he said, they'd like to go to Barcelona as a part of the MARC program. If we were all together in a room, I'd say, let's get out and let's go see the city, or let's go walk around, or let's go look at something in real life in the built environment. However, that's just not the same right now. And so having to kind of shift my desire always to be doing field work. I have a huge desire for field work. I decided to kind of shift the field to the home. So these drawings here make me think a lot about what it's like during COVID, which is seeing the world out your window and starting to think about your world inside versus the one that's kind of just on the other side of the wall from where you are at this moment. So the theme of the project that I ran last year was about analysis and kind of taking into consideration the world that exists around us and the way that we live in the everyday. And the everyday architecture is a part of my own research and something that I have a tremendous amount of interest in, which is the architecture, the kind of spatial configurations of people. So this here, a drawing by Sarah Wigglesworth, again, not a student drawing, but a very well-known drawing, which shows the dismantling of a dinner table over a time period of kind of sitting down at first, eating throughout the dinner, and then what it looks like at the end, and starting to say, how can we start to understand space in this way? And how do we start to document these things and appreciate how we inhabit space in so many capacities? And of course, because of the way that we were all learning online, this means documenting where we are at home at that point in time. So I just want to kind of read a quick quote here, which is from Frank Lloyd Wright, one of the greats. Says, take nothing for granted as beautiful or ugly, but take everything to pieces and challenge every feature. Learn to distinguish the curious from the beautiful and get the habit of analysis. Analysis will in time enable synthesis to become your habit of mind. So with those types of words, the Studio First project that I ran kind of had a few components to it, but it was all about trying to interpret surroundings. So here was a series of warm-up projects we did as a class called Blind Contour Drawing. And this really wasn't the project, but was a bit about kind of the essence of the project, which meant, what do you do when you draw without looking at your piece of paper, but looking at the object? You're just looking at the thing, right? You're not looking at what you're producing. So we did, in the top left-hand corner is an interpretation of a desk with a cable from a computer running down. The upper right-hand corner is the Pantheon, a section of a building. The lower two we did over Zoom by doing portraits of one another and trying to kind of just understand the meandering of pen on paper. But students were encouraged to start to say, okay, well, how do we draw is one thing, but also how do we document? How do we photograph? And this is a very famous photographer, Sophie Calle, who does these amazing kind of analytical photographs of the everyday, of the way that we live, watching people, watching where people go, how they inhabit space, but also how we inhabit space. And so encouraging students to say, you might feel that your house or your home is mundane or boring or where you spend all your time, but how do you start to kind of embrace that and start to think about the way you live as a part of architecture and a part of space? So going on to some student work, I just wanted to show a few examples, but to really, this is a beautiful drawing. We had so many beautiful drawings come out of the class. But Kiara here took some time to map what her daily life was like in the kitchen with her mom and her dog, and traces plates and food and dishes and footprints and paw prints throughout the room, and starts to use time as a way to kind of compress this experience and bring it all together through different layers. And she did this on the computer and drafted her space and thought about this analysis. And it's amazing to start to think about that occupation of space. Here as well, we have Michelle Parsons' work, and Michelle does this amazing job of contrasting where she works to where her partner works. And of course, this is all during COVID. So we've all had to adjust the way that we live. So she's down on the ground floor, sitting at her desk and working, and he's somebody who's on the phone a lot, and he's upstairs in a closed off room, kind of communicating. And she used the stairwell and these photographs that she pasted together to talk about that stairwell being their only connection during the day, as they yell up and down the stairwell at one another. And beside it are both of their desks and the kind of understanding of how their desks are organized and what it feels like to be at one of their desks. Here as well, Alex, again, we were really emphasizing what COVID has done to our lives, because it's such as much as it is absolutely difficult and frustrating and isolating, there's also some really interesting things to kind of take note of. And for example, Alex, for example, she moved back to her family, her childhood home, and she's a grown adult, but moved home, and she brought her newborn baby with her, and started to try to draw her room in a bit of a kind of time traveling way, string theory in a sense, where she starts to draw her room as a child, and then it starts to morph into her room now with a crib in the corner and kind of adult type things, and but also like baby type things in her room. And so it's this kind of play on how we change our views of the world. Here as well, Cameron, who's here today. Cameron did this amazing analysis of his apartment building, one that talks about the way that coming in from the building or in from parking, all the signage and kind of meandering you have to do to get up to his apartment, which is on one of the top floors in the building, which is paired then with this notion of kind of thinking of the world outside. And then he had these amazing colorful lights in his room that started to change that perception of the world outside, right? So this kind of documentation of the view, but the inside merging together to have that relationship of that space and what we're seeing. Lizzie took some time to draw her sisters in their shared bathroom, and same thing, all three of them moved home during COVID. And so they were sharing their, bathroom once again, socializing in this space and talking to one another in the space. So she played with section, cutting through the bathroom and thinking about what it means to be in that space and what people are doing in that space with one another. Veronique took some time to map out her deck and think about the sun and the sun movement and the shadows across that space, which was really fantastic. And so you weren't limited to just a room or even something inside, but to say, what's the world around you? What's your world? And how do you start to show that through drawing? And Yan Li, I have such an appreciation for this drawing because it's kind of a beautiful, beautiful, busy drawing, but she attempted to draw her child's playroom through the eyes of what they imagine and the make-believe space that they create in the space, which really starts to become an abstraction of anything real, but really quite fantastic. So, I'll end on another quote here, which is what really drives this notion of kind of documenting your space and who you are, which is that after all, it is life that is right and the architect that is wrong. So the way that we live is the way that we want to see the way that we can live, right? So, so that is everything from me. So I'll hand it over to Jesse. Thank you very much. Okay,
Thanks, Piper. That was great to see all that work from last year. I can kind of jump right in. Hi, everybody. I'm a recent graduate from Carleton here, where I did my undergrad in architectural studies as well. My current research and interests are in the middle of like building technologies and sustainable material practices, where I'm currently running a research lab in the basement at the architecture school, looking at different forms of prefabrication and construction and how to represent that in both industry and business. Last year, I had the pleasure to lead the digital lab workshop for both Studio First programs in May and July. And that led into an opportunity to help coordinate the Gateway Design Studio this last fall. The Gateway Design Studio, as Zach mentioned, is, or might have mentioned, is one of the first studios that MArch-1 students would be coming into in a 3.5-year stream. And that's where students kind of merge together with the 2-year stream of returning undergraduate students as well. Next slide, please, Becca. Looking at the digital lab, the lab will be a series of unique, engaging workshops that'll aim to introduce students to varying methods of creative digital design, thinking, and making. Through online tutorial-based demonstrations, assignments, and exercises, you'll practice the physical and technical skills used to produce and understand architectural concepts and drawings. Digital lab sessions will be organized to discuss a range of issues that are pertinent to many streams of graphic representation, and the skills-based and process-based sessions that we'll go through will be divided across several scales to understand many different approaches and methods that we'll be discussing. Next slide, please. The intensive 5-week course will be broken up into 3 sessions per week on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings from 10 a.m. till 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. Classes will be divided into 2 parts, primarily the first focusing on concepts, terminologies, and reviewing specific tasks of the day, and that'll be followed by tutorial-based demonstrations outlining efficient workflows and drawing commands that will parallel the tasks that are assigned in your studio projects. I'll be asking students to keep a small sketchbook over the duration of the course to catalog both their development, software commands, techniques, concept sketches, and just the everyday. Sketching is a great habit to get into as we move through this course and just into life in general. Next slide, please. In combination with your studio assignments and lessons, we'll develop your abilities to explore different design ideas by establishing connections between both the physical and digital-based platforms. We'll be focusing on Creative Cloud programs like Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign to graphically represent and interpret 2D and 3D modeling information that we'll make in AutoCAD and Rhino. Through a combination of hand drawing, photography, and digital drawing techniques, we're going to develop critical digital communication skills that aim to prepare students for a potential future in architectural studies. Next slide. In the midst of the new online universe that we're all currently in, all classes and lectures will operate daily through programs that you see here. So Zoom, Figma, and Slack. Upon enrollment into the course, each student will be given an online infrastructural guidebook to help downloading and installing of the required software prior to the first day of class. We'll be looking at Zoom, which will be used as the main platform through which instructors and students will interact face-to-face. Zoom meetings can house breakout rooms where instructors can host large lectures, small discussion groups, and one-on-one meetings all within the same session. When used together with Figma, it'll provide the entire studio with simultaneous feedback between instructor and student in the same way to simulate face-to-face desk crits. Looking at Figma, Figma will be the virtual studio space where students will be able to upload, comment, and work collaboratively with other classmates and instructors simultaneously. It will imitate a typical architectural desk crit or kind of pinup through its online interface. Students will be given a Figma team where they can work independently as well as work with different group members. This will be paired with Slack, which will be used for mainly all of kind of the studio-wide communications and become a library of digital resources for students as well as instructors to use throughout the term. In Slack, we can set up different communication channels that can be organized by topic, different private groups, there's direct messaging, and these can also be linked directly back into Figma. So we can see in live time, certain comments while discussing it over Zoom. Yeah, next slide, please. Oh, this is kind of just a quick screenshot of the Zoom interface. So when we're all together, we want to ask everybody to keep their cameras on so we can actually have full conversations, but understanding that there is certain situations that doesn't allow for that. Next slide. This is just a quick screen capture of the Figma kind of interface. So we can see different channels that are kind of opening up, and then each student will be given a individual board for you to upload your own personal work. Next slide. And then this is just a quick screen grab of the Slack interface. So on the left side, you can see different channels where we have the digital lab, kind of an instructors group, different studio announcements, and then we'll have different tables that students will be divided up into. And that way we can easily communicate certain things to either groups or to everybody as a whole. Next slide, please. During project one, we're going to be, like I mentioned before, there's going to be 3 different projects that we'll run over the course of Studio First. During project one, we're going to be developing critical design vocabularies while using an array of mediums, like Andrea Ross has mentioned, like hand drawing, photography, model making, and collage. We'll be focusing on main programs like Adobe Photoshop, as well as Illustrator to develop a series of architectural orthographic drawings. Next slide. Thanks, Piper. During project 2, students will be asked to develop a reflective journal on their current at-home workspaces, and we'll begin to develop necessary analytical and critical tool sets in programs like Rhino 2D and 3D, as well as Adobe Illustrator. Over this week and a half kind of course, we'll also go through a series of workshops that'll be specifically developed or positioned to develop a portfolio using Adobe InDesign. Next slide, please. Looking at project 3, we're going to continue to refine students' digital workflows, as well as introducing AutoCAD drafting and architectural drawing conventions. We're going to be working alongside the project 3 brief. We're going to be exploring the spatial and graphic narratives that single drawing and collective series of drawings can kind of put together. Students will be encouraged to be reflective on their current environments, as well as approach each project with the confluence of academic, professional, and personal experiences. The course will not just be about justifying, perfecting, and trying to create a new style, but rather understanding and exploring the factors that impact digital design. And these will be exploring through our personal values and different methods that we'll be learning through the digital lab. Next slide, please. Yep, I guess, yeah, that kind of wraps up everything that the digital lab will entail this year. If you do have any further questions regarding the core programs, software or hardware requirements, the daily schedule, etc., please feel free to comment in the chat. Looking forward to getting to know all of you and hopefully meeting you in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. And I'm going to now call on Cameron Penny, who took Studio First last summer and is currently enrolled in the Master of Architecture program at Carleton. And his undergraduate degree is in biology.
Hey everyone. So yeah, I previously studied at Carleton. I was in the biology program, and specifically I tailored my course selection towards urban ecology. So I was interested in the like what architecture and urbanism was even when I was in my undergraduate degree. And then I completed Studio First last summer. So it was the first summer everything was online, and I really found the instructors and the course and everything about it, they translated it really well to the online atmosphere, considering they didn't have that much time to adapt. I think it went really smoothly, and I imagine it's even improved in the second iteration, and let alone now. So it was a really good experience, and I really wish I had the in-person experience, but I think the online experience gives certain benefits that will translate nicely into your Master of Architecture studies too. And I found it's really helped me in the first transitioning into the graduate level studies.
Thanks, Cameron. Okay, so our next speaker is Matthew Munn, and he took part in Studio First in 2018. He's in second year at Carleton, and his first degree is in civil engineering.
All right, hello everyone. Yeah, my name is Matthew, and I took Studio First back when I was graduating from my engineering degree at the University of Alberta, actually. And at the time, I was really torn between considering a Master's of Engineering or a Master's of Architecture, and just what that would mean, what that would entail. And so I needed direction. I needed a little bit of help, and I think that the Studio First program really kind of guided me on to kind of shift maybe my interest from like a 50-50 to like a 51-49%, just to look on and see what else I could do. And I found Studio First was super helpful in all the different programs that was just listed, and all the images that you saw might have been very intimidating for those like without architecture degrees. But once you're in the program and you learn how to make those step by step, it really kind of opens up your opportunities to what architecture can be, and different thinkings behind architecture, and what does it mean to have like proper design. And I think that that's what I found was most beneficial for Studio First, and what I took from it and took on to the MArch 1 program, going through that, and now I'm in my second year. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. And so our last speaker is Andrea Mcintosh, who is a Studio First alumna and who's currently in the architecture program at Carleton.
Hi guys. So I'll just mention a few things about like coming from a different background before getting into architecture. I think it's a real benefit to the discipline to contribute different ways of knowing, doing, and seeing. I'm currently in the 3-year master's program at Carleton. I'm an Indigenous student from a small mining town in Northern Ontario. And you know, in my youth, I was a performer. I was a jazz vocalist, performing in clubs and outdoor festivals. And then in my undergrad, I really got into neurology, and I studied an honors in neuroscience and mental health at Carleton. And I was interested in topics like human consciousness, emotional engagement to spaces. And it's when I was studying for my MCATs and volunteering at a children's hospital that I realized that even though I love the patients and the initiatives, I just couldn't stand being in a hospital every day. I think that, you know, at that point, I realized that maybe I should consider maybe fully investigating a bit more about how environments shape our lives. And I had no design or drawing or making experience. Ultimately, I think that just allowed me to come to Studio First with a really open mind. And I really surprised myself with the types of methods and investigations and drawings and models that I ultimately made. So ultimately, I would recommend it to anyone who wants to work on their portfolio, anyone who doesn't have a portfolio, anyone who has really diverse backgrounds, unsure about what architecture schools are looking for in students. And I think you'll find the investigations really rewarding and the faculty very giving. So, yeah.
Thanks, Andrea. So we're now going to move on to the question and answer period. We are here to answer your questions. So please do add them to the chat box. What's on your mind? Is it possible we've answered all your questions? Oh, here we go. Okay, Jennifer wants to know how many courses will there be? Who can take that on? Piper?
Yeah, I assume like this is the question about Studio First. This isn't about the graduate program, I assume. So in terms of how many, so there's typically 3 projects that happen in the term of Studio First in the 5-week program. So 1.5 week, a 1 week, and a 2.5 week, essentially, that make out the program. And each of those, as Jesse was kind of outlining in his talk, those projects are individual kind of workshops, developing a certain set of skills, developing a certain way of thinking through a project that you can kind of get and make into a portfolio piece. But it also aligns with what Jesse was talking about, which means that as you're learning these projects, you're also learning a set of very kind of like real skills that you can apply to your work, right? So that'll be through a series of kind of digital skills that also help you alongside. So you essentially will be doing full days, at least from that's how we've run it before. So morning that'll be dedicated to that kind of digital programming, and afternoons which will be dedicated to the studio practice and course.
Okay, thank you. So Kate is asking if there's an example of what to submit for the application. If you're talking about the application to Studio First, there isn't an example. If you go to the website, it tells you the 3 pieces you need to submit, which is a short essay, your resume, and an image. And it gives fairly detailed descriptions of what's needed there. And Selena, how are days structured in terms of lecture time, working time, etc.? Piper?
Yeah, so and maybe Adriana will chime in as well. Each project, because it's with a different instructor, will vary in different ways as to how much lecture time versus crit time versus working time there is. For example, when I was teaching my project, like I said, Jesse does his tutorials in the morning, and it's not every morning, if I'm correct, Jesse, that you do it, but 4 out of 5 days kind of typically, is that correct?
Yeah, we were doing, last year, we were doing like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning with an optional kind of like Tuesday for kind of troubleshooting and just like a general work period that I could be available for on office hours, I could say.
Yeah, that's great. Exactly. And so Jesse becomes available to make sure that you're kind of caught up on the work and learning those skills. For my class, for example, I did my project was 1 week long this last summer. And so I did kind of a series of lectures at the beginning of each class for a short period of time, probably kind of 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And then what happens is you go start working with the other kind of co-instructors in the studio. And they start to meet with you over desk crits, including myself, to help you develop your project. And that's what studio culture is like. It's about bringing forward work and receiving feedback and reflecting on that work and continuing the work forward. So Adriana, how did you structure your course?
It's similar to your structure. We start with lecture, 45 minutes, and then we go to the exercises, and with the co-instructors, we help each other and have like the desk crits and feedbacks and comments. So it's a work in progress after the lecture. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Will the studio offer tutorials for all software? Jesse?
Yeah, we're still looking into that, but last year we did provide a license over the duration of the course for the Creative Cloud. So that's an open access into Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. And then there's 90-day trials for the McNeil software called Rhino. And then there's also a 1-year free subscription for AutoCAD. So we will be providing those kind of subscription kind of details once you are enrolled. But there is other softwares that are free of charge. And then we also will be providing that online infrastructural guidebook for downloading Zoom, downloading Figma, as well as Slack.
Thank you. Here's a question maybe for Zach. Someone has already applied to the MArc1 for this year, didn't know about Studio First, and is wondering if they should do Studio First.
Sure, that's a great question. So admission decisions will be made in the coming months. I can tell you the MArc1 program will have about a 15% admissions rate this year. So no harm in applying to Studio First as well to see. So you have 2 options, and some students elect to do both actually. And sometimes there can be, depending on your funding offer from the university, sometimes that makes Studio First a little bit cheaper too. So I would recommend applying and seeing where the chips fall.
Thanks, Zach. Okay, for the application, students are required to write a 500-word essay about themselves. Is there anything specific that the admission committee for Studio First is looking for in that essay? If you bear with me, I can probably provide a bit of an answer for that. I think it's really simple. It's describing your interest in the program. Like, tell us about yourself, where you're coming from, why you're thinking about architecture. Yeah, we want to know where you're coming from and who you are and how, kind of what you've got under your belt and what's bringing you to think about architecture. Okay, a question about the tuition. Has the tuition changed since moving to online only instruction? The tuition actually hasn't changed since the program started 6 years ago. So put another way, there have been no increases in the tuition in 6 years. The tuition has not changed, but students do receive, each student will receive a box of art supplies that will be shipped to their homes, as well as receiving free access to software programs.
I do think, Maria, if I can add to that, although that hasn't changed and it's true, you do get it with the box of materials that comes with it. Certainly the experience is still very much so one-on-one, even though it can't be in person. So that hasn't been sacrificed at all. It's not, you know, for example, a distant kind of learning condition where you don't really get to know the teachers. It's actually quite personable still. But I would also mention that actually the online version does offer it's not in the tuition itself, but certainly not having to go to Ottawa creates a substantial change we found with students, you know, because they didn't have to move somewhere for 5 weeks at a time to commit to the program. They could stay where they were. They could continue on with their lives at the same time. So this is something that we saw as really beneficial, actually, and it does relieve the kind of financial burden partially of the program and the requirement of being in person. So I think that it's not directly with the tuition, but it's something that certainly is a good part of the kind of online world, especially when you are really getting a lot of the one-on-one talking with those teachers. So
I think maybe I'll just, yeah. Oh, sorry, Maria.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, just to quickly build on that too, most of the lectures, as well as I think all of the digital lab workshops, will be recorded and uploaded to our private, I think we were using a YouTube channel last year. We're going to see if we're just going to house it somewhere else. But that also, you know, aids to some kind of small benefits that if you do miss a class, you can watch that in the evening. While we do recommend everybody obviously attending, you know, all live sessions and live courses, there is that option to kind of help with that.
Okay, that's great, thanks. So Kate is just clarifying, is there an example of the drawing portion? Again, the point is for us to learn about you. We're asking for a recent visual representation of your work that showcases your aptitude for a studio-based design program. It can be any medium, as long as it's an original piece. It can be drawing, painting, photography. It could be sculpture. I mean, we've had people who have submitted images of furniture that they've made. It's sort of anything that shows that you're using your mind and your hands and your eyes to be creative. So we had a dentist last year, and he submitted a plaster model of teeth, because that was what he knew how to make. So next question, would a candidate with background in architecture willing to have the experience of a program like this be considered, or is it strictly for non-architecture graduates? So that's a great question. We do have people with backgrounds in architecture who come to the program for various reasons. In some cases, their programs have really focused on history and theory, and they haven't had as much design studio experience, and so they're looking to gain that experience and to build their portfolio. Others have been international students, and they're interested in learning how things are done here in Canada. So yeah, definitely we have had, and we have applications for this here for people who are coming from architecture backgrounds, in addition to a very, very wide range of disciplines. Okay, have we ever had people applying who work full-time? I know the courses will be recorded, available. However, the studio discussion seems quite important. If I were able to take 1 week off, which week of the studio first would you recommend focusing on? Zach?
I'd say you should wait until the project descriptions come out. They're all quite different. So for instance, Adriana and Piper's project tend to be about 1 week in length. So you would have a good alignment there. The third project in past years has been 2.5 weeks in length. So I wouldn't recommend missing a majority of one of the projects. That said, the real takeaway here, in addition to all of the learning and the experience you gain, is the portfolio material. That's the valuable element for moving forward into a graduate architecture program. So ask us again when the project briefs come out and you have a sense of which one maybe appeals to you the most, and we'll pick one that's closer to 1 week in length so you get the most out of it.
Thanks, Zach. That's great. Are there any other questions? Yes, when will the project brief be coming out? Where are we at? We're in February. Hopefully soon. Piero will let you know. Are there any other questions? Right. When is the project brief coming out? Because I know that the fee is due March the 1st. If you, I mean, I'm assuming that you are interested in Studio First, and but the your question is which week off should you take to focus on? We can fine tune that discussion. I think once we have more information. Okay. Question, I think, for Jesse, should we have a specific type of computer, Mac versus PC?
Nope. I think all computers will be, should work the same. Like when we send out the project briefs, we'll also be giving that online infrastructural guidebook. And in that, it'll outline kind of some of the core requirements in terms of hardware that your computers should have. But it is quite basic, so there's no need to spend lots of money on upgrades or anything like that. Through most of the lectures and tutorials, like I'll be explaining certain things on a PC. I'm currently on a PC, but giving what the commands might be in Mac or resources and things to see what that is or how you would use it on a Mac.
Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, so Jennifer is also saying that she has a full-time job and would like to know when the project brief comes out. So absolutely, we'll get that information to you. Are there any other questions? Looks like we're reached the end of the questions. Thank you again to our presenters. Thank you to our guests for finding the time in your busy days to attend this open house. We hope it was helpful and enjoyable, and we look forward to meeting some of you this summer in Studio First. You have our email if you have further questions. I'm always available for any additional questions that you may have. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Great. We still have